talk about making inferences. As you can see here, an inference can be defined as forming a conclusion based on background knowledge and text clues. The formula we use for inferences is BK plus TC equals I. BK stands for background knowledge, text clue equals inference. Text clues are the things you get from the story. What information does the story actually give you? What can you pull out of the text? You use that along with what you already know, your background knowledge, to draw a conclusion or make an inference and learn something that you didn't know about the text previously. Okay, so as it says here, a reader should connect their background knowledge to the text clues while reading. As you can see on this page, we've got 13 types of inference. We've got emotion, inference, location, character trait, action, object, time era, category, occupation, cause effect, literary, author's bias, cultural inference, and a vocabulary inference. Now, these all have their own examples here that you can see, and these can be downloaded from the class webpage so that you can have your own version of this. While we read, we want to focus on all types of inference. So in other words, we don't want to just search for one specific inference. We don't want to say, okay, now I'm going to find an emotion inference. That's not how it works. As you're reading, you should be looking for text clues and connecting your background knowledge so you can make an inference. Then you determine, okay, what type of inference did I just make? Here's an example of a story. It's called Cussin' Cowboys. See, there's a little introduction here, some text here. We've got a few headlines here and a picture. First thing I want to do is preview this text. So I see it's called Cussin' Cowboys. All right, I'm going to read this little blurb at the beginning. Sit on a hard slab of leather until your butt is completely numb. Stick a few cactus thorns in your legs. Inhale clouds of dust all day long. Get soaked by the rain, pelted by snow, smashed by hail, and fried by the sun. Oh yeah, and spend your day in the company of thousands of farting, belching cows and lovesick bulls. Well, being a cowboy sure is some kind of glamorous. Here it says the first cowboys were actually Indians. It says word up. Bet the word cowboy doesn't make you think New York, but that's for the word was first used during the Revolutionary War when British loyalists rang cowbells just before they pounced on patriot farmers. This heading says go west, young men, and down here we've got a picture. It says whoopee-tie-I-A. Rope tricks were a good way to pass the time on the range. Now, all this is previewed information. Okay, so I want to look at everything outside of the normal text before I begin reading. So based on everything that I just read, I'm going to make an inference. I'm going to make a prediction, which is going to say, well, I think this is going to tell us about cowboys and how what they actually were is different than the way they're perceived in Hollywood movies. So I'm going to begin reading this. I'm going to look for some text clues. I'm going to couple that with my background knowledge to come up with some inferences. Ever watch a cowboy movie? It's all about wide open spaces, dusty cattle drives, high noon shootouts, and those huge golden sunsets. But what was it really like? Well, until the first Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas in the 1500s, there wasn't a single horse here. Okay, I'm going to highlight that information. That is my text clue right there. It tells me that until the Spanish came, there were no horses. So I'm going to stop, and I'm going to make an inference. The inference that I'm going to say is, well, until I'm going to make the inference that the Europeans brought horses and cows to the New World. Now, my text clue is that sentence that I highlighted earlier. Right here. Until the first Spanish explorers arrived, there wasn't a single horse here. Okay? So, that leads me to believe that Europeans brought horses to the world. I was able to use my background knowledge and say, okay, well, there's horses here now, and cowboys use horses, so obviously they had to come from somewhere, So they must have came from the Europeans when they came to the New World. Now, so there's my inference. I use my background knowledge and my text clues. Now I have to determine what type of inference that is. Okay? I'm going to say that that is a cause-effect inference. The effect was there's now horses in the New World. The cause, which I inferred, was the Europeans brought them with. Okay, now let's keep reading, see if we can find out any more information about that inference or come up with some new ones. Come to think of it, there were no cows either. Back in Europe, there were cows aplenty, but they were kept penned up since land was scarce. But America's West was huge. There was no reason to keep a cattle crowded in little spaces. No need to spend a lot of time and effort feeding them. Let those lazy moochers get their own food and water. Okay, I'm going to highlight this right here. Let those lazy moochers get their own food and water. I'm going to go to my next page. I'm going to create another inference. I'm going to say, well, cows and cattle are self-sufficient, right? Meaning they are capable of feeding themselves. Okay, again, my text clue right here. Let those lazy moochers get their own food and water. I coupled that with my background knowledge, saying, well, I've seen cows before. I've seen what they do in the pasture, okay? They sit there and they eat the grass, and they seem to be pretty self-sufficient. So I make that inference. The text didn't tell me that. I was able to make that myself. Now, what type of inference is that? That would be a character trait inference, because I'm inferring a character trait about the cows. Now, moving on. Spanish settlers began to make themselves at home in what is now Mexico in the 1500s. They soon had scads of horses and longhorn cattle roaming all over the place. I'm going to stop there because I see a word, scads, which I'm unfamiliar with. Now, I'm going to infer that that word means lots. My text clue is they soon had scads of horses and longhorn cattle roaming all over the place. Then it says, ta-da, the first ranches were born. So I'm inferring that scads means there's many. What type of inference did I just make? This is a vocabulary inference. I saw a word. I didn't know what it meant. I used my background knowledge and I used the text clues to determine what it meant. Now, I'll continue to read this passage in the same fashion, making several more inferences. As I read, I look for text clues. I'm connecting that with my background knowledge, and I'm using that to draw a conclusion or make a new inference.